So I'm now joined by Sajjad Jihad from Baghdad. He is a political analyst and managing director at the Al Bayan Center for Planning and Studies. So it has taken many months of negotiations and backroom talks between rival parties and political blocs in the country for this appointment to actually be named. What are the immediate challenges or priorities for Mohammed Alawi?
Well, there are several protests continuing in the country, in provinces south of Baghdad, in Baghdad itself. There are demands for justice for those that have been injured and killed in the protests the last few months. In addition, we have obviously the issue of foreign troops and the parliament's resolution to ask foreign troops to leave Iraq. We have the fallout from the airstrikes against Qasem Soleimani and Mahdi Mohandes in Iraq that the Americans conducted. We have our issues with, the political equation in Iraq and the economic situation in the country, which is heavily reliant on oil. I mean, there are huge challenges, and some people say that, they're insurmountable for somebody to come in as an independent prime minister to try to take them all on at once. I think the PM designate has made it clear that one thing he wants is to restore trust between his government, the political class, and protesters. And that's why he's saying the first thing he will do is try to win back some of the confidence of these protesters.
So really, he has to balance two big spheres of influence, I guess. Here, on the one hand, you have the politicians and the elite. On the other hand, the protesters in the streets. In terms of the politics, first of all, the two main blocs in the parliament, so Roon, led by Muqtada al-Sadr, who has expressed his support for Alawi, and then also the Popular Mobilization Units, which is led by Fatah and Heidi al-Amiri. Now, can he be secure and assured of their support?
Well, for now, he's in the same position as his predecessor, Adel Abdel Mahdi. He is relying on these two blocs to keep him in power. This prime minister, same as I said, his predecessor, doesn't have his own party or his own bloc, so he's going to rely on these two, the largest kind of blocs in parliament, to support him. But the situation could change. We saw Muqtada al-Sadr being critical of the previous prime minister and withdrawing his support and supporting protests against him. And there could be a fear that if this new prime minister does not kind of toe the line or follow the wishes of these two large blocs, that one of them could withdraw their support. And without their support, the prime minister would not be able to go on. He does not have any MPs in parliament, does not hold a party in parliament. And he's dependent, for Muqtada al-Sadr's support and Adel al-Amiri's. Without them, it's not possible to govern in Iraq at the moment.
Will there be one view of Mohammed Alawi on the part of protesters? Or might there be perhaps disagreements over whether he is a new face or whether he is just a part of the entrenched interests of the existing governing elite?
So that's a concern. I think protesters in Baghdad and elsewhere have already expressed tonight their concern that this prime minister is being born out of an equation that supports the status quo. Hadi al-Amiri and Muqtada al-Sadr and the rest of the political class that support the nomination of Mohammed Alawi are going to want a prime minister who's not going to challenge them. Now, it's up to Mohammed Alawi to prove that he's actually not going to toe the party lines. But for protesters, it's similar to the moment when Adel Abdel Mahdi took power. And they didn't expect much. And to be honest, I think they're very disappointed by what happened from Adel Abdel Mahdi. They expected more from an independent prime minister. But perhaps the system is just not capable of working in this way. To have an independent prime minister beholden to larger blocs and parties, not able to reform and push back against the failings of these last 16, 17 years, it's a big task. But I think protesters don't expect that much from Mohammed Alawi, which is why they're quite critical of his appointment.
If their expectations are not particularly high, does that mean that he could perhaps gain their trust or their confidence by taking some steps at least?
Yes, I'm sure that's what he wants to do early on, to win back some trust from the average person. I think he wants to make sure that there is accountability for the people that conduct violence against protesters, which still haven't been identified, where everybody assumes that they're government forces, but which government forces are they, and how have they been able to kill almost 600 people in protests these last 4 months? So that's an important step. Number two, there's still hundreds of protesters who have either been questioned by police forces, who are still awaiting questioning or investigation, who are locked up in cells around the country. Perhaps an amnesty to let those go immediately would bring back some trust. Additionally, I think any steps that the new prime minister makes to kind of push back against the status quo, I think will be welcomed. But people are not holding up much hope. And I think he's got a lot on his hands.
Are we seeing in Iraq this increasing disparity between the ability of the government to control and shape events and just paramilitary groups and different militias on the ground that are basically pursuing their own interests?
I mean, we have had this system for a few years now in Iraq, and the results don't seem to be improving. In fact, we seem to be stuck in this balancing between multiple players, and our governments are coalition governments. The power sharing that we have at this moment is leading to unstable governments, and I think we need to get rid of this stability by changing up the system. And I think one point of progress we've had recently is this new electoral law, which should produce new types of candidates, which should produce perhaps a more diverse field of candidates rather than the existing ones beholden to kind of the larger established parties. And the second thing is we need to look at, seriously, how do we prevent violence in Iraqi politics? Most of the major parties have an armed wing and have, paramilitary groups, have weapons, and unfortunately they look like they're willing to use it anytime their power is threatened. So that needs to be tackled. And I'm not sure this temporary government that is coming in, however long it lasts, for a year or two, is capable of doing that. But protesters, will not easily go away. The issues that they're campaigning for, that they're protesting for, are extremely important to the country. And I think it will be a number of years before we see these really serious, deep reforms undertaken.
Thank you very much, Sajjad Jihad, joining us there from Baghdad. Appreciate your time.